Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night on this wonderful August 11th of 2025. I am Matt Kimball, and I am joined by the ever wonderful Will Townsend and Paul Smith-Goodson, who is visiting us from 1995. Would you explain? He somehow used his quantum computing to figure out time, space, and
I have no idea what's going on.
I'm just kidding. We're having a good time. Hey, welcome to episode 48 of the Moor Insights Strategy Datacenter Podcast. We are here to talk all things data center. But before we get going, three things. First is please like and subscribe. We love that. Number one. Number two, if you don't like and subscribe and you have something negative to say, direct it at Paul, as he is in the past and he'll never see it. And number three, don't take anything we say as financial or investing advice. We're here purely to muse on what's going on in the industry and have some fun discussions. And hopefully you learn something from this, but you don't take it as some kind of instruction to go out and do something foolish, like trust us for investing. So with that said, we got a lot to talk about. Oh, by the way, and we're coming on the heels of the first preseason NFL weekend.
Yes.
And the rankings were Texas preseason rankings for NCAA football, where Texas has come out on top as the number one preseason favorite.
First time in the history of the program when Vince Young led us to a national championship 20 years ago. We were ranked number 2. We actually went to Ohio State. We defeated them on their turf. And we'll be playing Ohio State, number 1, number 2. I think that's one of the first times the number 1 and number 2 have also opened the season. We will be going back to Ohio State. I am not a Buckeyes fan. I think our illustrious leader, Patrick Moorhead, is. Yes. So I'm just going to say hook 'em horns. I'm making no predictions, but I'm hoping we can bring home the trophy 20 years after our last national championship. So
I was surprised to hear they were never ranked number 1 preseason.
No, number 2 is the highest that they. Yeah, it's surprising because we've had some nice runs over the last couple hundred years.
I'm a Texas fan and Ohio. I lived in Ohio for like 18 years. So
you better resolve this conflict, Paul.
Yeah,
I'm just schizophrenic here.
Well, my first wife was an Aggie, and and I think that's why my first marriage didn't work out, and so my second wife is just a Kansas City Chiefs fan, so she's got no college loyalty.
Yeah. Hey, Paul, do us a favor. Travel to like September 8th of 2025 in your time machine, and let us know who wins so we can play some bets. Okay.
Like a la Back to the Future, right? Biff's tips, sports tips.
If I did that, you guys could come and visit me in my mansion.
All right, here we go. We got a lot to talk about. That was a fun little intro. A lot to talk about. Black Hat, QEC, AMD. Oh, wow, a lot. AMD, Infoblox, Quantum, as usual, and this company that no one's ever heard of called NVIDIA. We'll be curious to see what we have to talk about. So let's jump right in. I think, Will, you're kicking us off with your insights from Black Hat. You want to jump in here?
Yeah, you bet, Matt. So I did not attend this year, so I covered it from afar. But and this is a gratuitous plug, I will be summarizing lots of insights on a forthcoming Forbes piece. So hoping that'll drop, towards the end of this week. But, at a very high level, a couple of things really stood out for me. One, no shock, lots of discussion around agentic AI, protecting AI workloads. One of the predictions I made after RSA conference was that runtime would become more and more important. When you look at Cisco and what they're doing with their AI defense and their Hyper Shield and all of their Star Wars themed AI security solutions, runtime plays a very, very important role. And Robust Intelligence was a company that Cisco had acquired to do that. But at the event, there was a lot of discussion around runtime and automating red teaming functions and that sort of thing. So I'll be leaning into that a little bit more deeply. A lot of discussion around threat intel, and one of the areas that I think Hewlett Packard Enterprise is lacking is threat intelligence, right? So I mean, they're delivering security, across storage. I think we've talked about that in the past, as well as what they're doing with Aruba and networking and agentic and all of that. But I think I've suggested to that team that could be an opportunity, especially with HPE Labs, to focus on that. I think it's going to become more and more important. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this when I talk about Infoblox and something that they announced at Black Hat this year. But finally, the last point I'll make, because I don't want to steal all the thunder from that Forbes piece, is that this whole notion of enterprise browsers is heating up, right? And there's lots of momentum. I've spent some time with Mammoth Cyber. They do something pretty interesting from an enterprise browser perspective. Palo Alto Networks has their solution. Cisco has an investment in Island.io. And if you think about it, it's going to become more and more important, given the fact that you're using browsers for prompting and for interfacing, with all of these solutions, whether it's ChatGPT, OpenAI, or Grok or whatever. So I do believe that category will heat up. I think you will see some moves by some of the larger infrastructure providers to either look at acquisition or do whatever they need to do internally from a roadmap development perspective. But those are some of the big things that I saw coming out of Black Hat. And I know, Matt, security crosses your area, it crosses Paul's as well. But did anything at Black Hat kind of pique your interest this year?
I was interested in, they leaned in pretty hard on agentic AI security, like you said, and zero trust. I understand they had like 100 briefings, or about 100 briefings on that. So, so it was interesting that the researchers managed to hijack Google Gemini using an invisible prompt and a calendar invite, and then they use that calendar invite to control different devices. So, when you're thinking about AI bots and stuff, it can be tricked and can be abused. So, a lot of things that can happen.
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting sort of aspects to Black Hat. They have this sort of separate parallel. I don't want to call it a conference, but it's, they bring in all these ethical hackers, right? To do this type of work. And it's a very practitioner focused event. And it's interesting, RSA conference is sort of the granddaddy. But I like what, Black Hat focuses on from exactly what you're describing, like the sort of this ethical hacking. Activity.
How do you make it work? Or how does this actually kind of land in the real world? And Paul, what you're bringing up is kind of, that's the thing that, and I'm glad they're focusing, there's still such a big focus on agentic AI, because while everybody says, agentic AI, the security is going to be kind of inherent and you don't have to, I struggle mightily to understand how, if I'm a bad actor and I am using agentic AI to try and compromise your environment. Paul just brings out a great example of it happening kind of, right off the bat, right? How exposed can you possibly, or how exposed can an organization be, right? I mean, you're talking about fully autonomizing your enterprise, supply chain, HRM, ERP, SC, all of your acronyms and so on and so forth, right? They're all being driven by automation and these digital workers. And if I can put in some, bad digital workers, my gosh, I don't think this is an open and closed kind of case where you just have to trust that it's going to be taken care of. And it's nice to see. Conferences like Black Hat kind of there to kind of expose this and force that more of that kind of red team, kind of blue team operations to drive better kind of outcomes. The other thing is on the enterprise browser, this is going to be a fun one to watch too. Do you think, Will and Paul, I ask you both, do you think enterprise browsers is the end state, or do you think this is a kind of temporary place to be?
Well, you need to treat your calendars, your docs, your tickets, MCP endpoints.
Mhm.
Those are all right now untrusted inputs. Anything that your bot reads, calendar invites, PDFs, support tickets, whatever. It can, or any tool it can call, they can contain hidden instructions right now or bad data.
Yeah.
You can't assume that they're safe just because they're internal either. A calendar invite could hide a lot of text that tells a bot email some of your bad pictures to your customer mailing list, and so it'll go out and do that.
That's the excuse I used.
Yeah.
And bad actors can hide malware within images now. It's and that, to your point, and I identified this after spending the whole week in San Francisco at RSA earlier this year. The whole notion of provisioning and orchestrating agents and the permissibility and that sort of thing is going to be a big challenge, right? And this gets back to like the example that Paul made as well. And it's the whole notion of like identity access management, privilege access management for machine to machine and super agents and task agents and that sort of thing. And so there's a lot of focus on this. In fact, Cisco was working on something called agency that, and I don't recall if I mentioned this on a prior podcast, but it's a framework that sort of defines all of that. It's an open standard. Mm-hmm. And Cisco sort of incubated this through its Outship organization, which is their incubation engine. Yeah. And they had a couple of companies partnered with them. But recently, in order to scale it out, Cisco basically turned that framework initiative over to the Linux Foundation. And then all of a sudden, you saw companies like Dell Technologies join and others, and I think Google. And so I think we're going to see a lot more focus here. And you mentioned, Matt, is this sort of enterprise browser thing sort of a temporary thing? No, I mean, security is about a layered approach, right? But you've got to manage, sprawl and that sort of thing. And that's why we've seen a trend around consolidation and platform led by companies like Palo Alto Networks. But I think also what this is really going to put a lens on is API level security as well, because a lot of this is API integrated, right? Mm-hmm. And that's pretty low level stuff that's often hard to detect and monitor and that sort of thing. And so I do think that you're going to see additional momentum around enterprise browsers. I'm already beginning to see zero trust type architecture deployments within the browser, which if you would have asked me 2 or 3 years ago when PR companies were pitching me on zero trust browsers, I laughed it off. But here we are, and that's happening. And so I think also you're going to see a double down focus on API level security as well as a result of all of this.
Yeah, I think that's why an acquisition like CyberArk was so good.
The timing was perfect, right? And if you read through that press release, and I am working on a Forbes article that I'm hoping that goes further into my insights on that acquisition is going to drop this week. But Nikesh Arora, the CEO, talked about how this was the perfect time for the company to focus on identity, because it's going to be such an important part of agentic moving forward, agentic AI.
Just one more thought, and we'll jump on to Paul. But the whole enterprise browser thing. The only reason I asked that question is I think about, if you think 5 years from now, where I am Matt Kimball or Will Townsend or Paul Smith Goodson, and we have 40 digital agents or digital workers that are helping us with our day-to-day tasks. Is a browser where I go and I kind of manage some of that and kind of use that. Is that what the end state is going to look? That's where I'm kind of, it's not an answer to be a question to be answered to. I'm just kind of curious, like, what does it look like at the end of, or at the maturation, if you will, of kind of agentic AI in the enterprise, especially from a personal assistant, personal agent kind of perspective?
I think that's the way it's headed, Matt, because if you look at the focus, Microsoft, Google, they're creating these agent sort of stores, right? And they're going to be all these sort of derivatives. And this is based on open standards, various large and small language models. And I think that is going to be the console. It's going to be an enterprise browser because there's just going to be such a plethora of agents. But who knows? I mean, that's sort of my prediction on where it's headed and why I think this whole notion of enterprise browsers is going to really gain some speed.
Yeah. Interesting. Anyway, okay. All right, let's move on because we literally could talk about it next hour. This is definitely not mine. 95% can't be wrong. That is definitely somebody else. Who might that be? Paul. All right, what do we got going on there?
Yeah, there's a company called River Lane. Does research and development on quantum error correction, quantum computing, and industry applications. They do some really, really clever work with quantum and with algorithms and stuff. And they've been putting out a survey on quantum error correction every year. And they put one out for 2025, and they've got the results back. And it kind of surprises me, some of the results. The most recent quantum survey shows that companies that are using quantum need to bridge the gap between being aware of quantum error correction and how much training they're getting to use it. Mm-hmm. The survey found that 95% of quantum people, professionals, consider quantum error correction to be essential because we've got to scale up and we need quantum error correction to scale up. But it also found out that in the survey that there were a lack of things that allowed the people to use quantum error correction. They didn't have the training, they didn't have the knowledge, didn't have guidelines, best practices, and that type of thing. And because there's such a huge need and an immediate requirement for quantum error correction, the report logically recommended companies should treat it as a priority. And it absolutely floors me that 95% of the people know about it, but don't know how to do it. But when you look at some of the things that you can do right now that kind of patch that up, I mean, you form a partnership with companies that has the expertise. They need to invest in, creating internal resources that understand quantum expertise. Mm-hmm. And every quantum company's got a roadmap, and they need to somehow make an adjustment to that roadmap to ensure that they've got quantum error correction built into it, either through a vendor's hardware, or through their own resources, or whatever. Companies like IBM has got a complete system for quantum computing. They've got integrated solutions. They've got technical support that also includes quantum error correction. Mm-hmm. And being able to develop fault-tolerant algorithms. You guys saw that last article I wrote on quantum error correction and IBM, and fault tolerance, bringing it in 2029. So, there is time to for people to train the people up yet. But there's reasons why the gap kind of exists. There's no real playbook right now that has got the guidelines or best practices or maturity models for quantum error correction deployment. So when somebody starts working on it, I mean, they get stalled right at step one. And it takes a lot of a broad set of skills to develop quantum error correction. You're looking at physics, quantum computing, control. We're looking at firmware, real-time decoding. So I mean, it's a big list of combinations and skills that you need to do it. So, and another problem is that right now we've got different code choices for quantum error correction. Previously it was surface code that was a big thing. Now we've got quantum low density parity check. IBM is using that. Quite a few companies are using that. And now Microsoft came out with another brand new one that looks pretty good. It's 4-dimensional. We talked about that before.
Yeah.
The decoder stack kind of evolved fast, and so people don't want to get locked into a certain code stack and then have something new come along and make it antiquated. So companies just need to start, maybe having setting up some type of a priority for the next year or next 2 years. It aligns with their roadmaps. If you don't know anything about quantum error correction right now, find a partner that does, and then start scaling up internally and developing your own resources. So, there's things that can be done, but this survey opened my eyes, and I mean, everybody knows that you need quantum error correction to scale and to get to fault tolerance, but the training, the playbooks, and access just hasn't caught up with it. Yeah. So they need to treat quantum error correction like we treated AI adoption back 5 years ago or 7 years ago. So you need to start with partnerships and some type of make sure you've got some type of internal correction curriculum that's going to lead you to where you can build a reference quantum error correction stack. So
hey, Paul,
I thought the survey was pretty valuable.
Hey, Paul, not to go off the reservation or drag this down a rabbit hole, but I'm kind of curious, because you talk about quantum a bit. Obviously, you are a quantum guy. When I think about quantum, and I know you're going to touch on more quantum in your next topic, but as I think about quantum and hitting kind of mainstream and becoming a broadly adopted technology, it seems like there are two probably a bunch, right? But two significant challenges I see. One is you talk about error. I guess let's call it three. Error correction obviously is one. You point that out. Another is just like being able to access to technology. But the third is maybe the biggest, and that is nobody knows quantum. You need a PhD. It seems you need a PhD level kind of education or a master's in computer science and physics to fully understand. When does quantum become consumable even to a kind of developer type or architect type that can use this within the enterprise? Do you see a similar, because you mentioned skills gap in there a few times, right? To me, that seems like the biggest challenge that we're going to have with broad adoption of quantum. What do you see?
Yeah, IBM has got a program that makes it much simpler to program quantum now, and I forgot how many millions of people are using it, but that there is something out there that simplifies quantum. So
Just feels to me like, as we talk about the AI skills gap and, the challenges companies have, and they go to an Accenture or they go to a Deloitte or somebody to kind of augment their lack of, their team. There really isn't a similar kind of quantum makes AI skills gap look simple, right? It just seems like this is a far more complex technology and far more complex inflection to kind of to kind of wrap around, if you will.
yeah, I mean, look at what you're playing with. I mean, you're playing with. It's not like putting together a DSU or something like that. I mean, all of the underlying technology is there. I mean, it's kind of plug and play, and a lot of programming and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But with quantum, I mean, if you look at the different types of qubits, look at trapped ion and neutral atom and stuff. I mean, you're getting down to the base level of what the world is made out of. They actually change the levels of energy that they use in atoms, and where they want the electrons to be and what that does to the properties and stuff. So I mean, it's really quite complicated.
Yes, thank you for making my point.
Yeah.
I was snoozing on, in those classes, where they taught us about protons and neutrons and electrons. I better brush up.
Yeah. I mean, you have to know which color of laser to hit an atom with in order to change position of where that electron is going to go, and what kind of properties you're going to get when it goes to that level. So,
go watch that movie. Is it Real Genius? Val Kilmer back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right, let's move on, because that's another week ago. All right, musing on AMD earnings. This is really this is my topic. This is maybe a little bit bigger than AMD, but I want to kind of frame this and get the thoughts of you guys. So a couple weeks ago, TSMC, I'm going to be looking down because I have some numbers I want to cite out. TSMC kind of announced their earnings, 30 billion or so in revenue, 38% or 39, closer to 39% year-over-year growth, 61% year-over-year profit growth. Gross profit margin was 59%. Profit margin net was about 43%. Killer earnings, right? 30 billion. I mean, they're just kind of going through the roof. We all know AMD is one of their largest customers, along with NVIDIA and some others. About a week ago, or that was about 3 weeks ago, about 2 weeks ago, Intel comes out with their earnings for DCAI. I can't remember if I covered this on the podcast. I'm going to go over just the data center stuff. Client is interesting. Well, it's not even interesting. It's cute, but it's not interesting to me. The data center stuff, 3.9 billion, largely Xeon, because let's face it, they're really doing nothing with Gaudi. So 3.9 billion in revenue, up about 5% year over year. Their operating income, 630 million or so, up from 240 or so million a year ago. Operating margin, 16%, which isn't great, but it was pretty horrible a year ago. So kind of good trend for them, right? AMD came out last week, 3.2 billion for DCAI, for their DC or their data center segment. That includes EPYC, that includes the DPU, and that includes the MI series GPU. So the 300, 325, the 355 GPUs, 355 they just started shipping, so those don't really impact. And then 308 to China. So 3.2 billion. Their operating income was a negative 155 million. So they lost 155 million. Last year, this time, they made 743 million. By the way, their revenue is 14% year over year. But if you look at their previous quarters, it had been 120% growth, 120% growth, 60% growth, 65%. Incredible numbers. And then their margin, operating margin was a negative 5%, down from 26% last year. Okay. So their numbers didn't look good. And when Lisa Su, Dr. Lisa Su got on the earnings and the financial folks got on, everything was pinned on the MI308. They had to do an $800 million write-off because of the export restrictions into China. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, something doesn't add up to me. So they said, it was largely their growth was on EPYC growth in hyperscale and in the data center, but it doesn't fully add up to me. So you went from roughly 750 million in operating income a year ago to a negative 150 million. That's far more than $800 million write-off, right? Yeah. Your margin went from 26% to negative 5% this year. And yet your revenue went up 14%, not as exclusive. It's interesting, and they're talking about kind of EPYC gaining, and EPYC has gained market share, continues to gain market share on Xeon. So it doesn't, something doesn't happen to me, and I know AMD is killing it. This is not I don't want this to be a Debbie Downer, but I'm kind of musing on this a little bit because I'm kind of curious as to what's going on. They relied on a big surge in MI300 and MI325 GPU sales over the last year. It feels, as I'm looking at this, what I think is their GPU sales in general have all tailed off or trailed off.
Yeah.
And EPYC has been kind of the driver of revenue. And it seems to me that they're being very pressed on price for EPYC, which is what's leading to some of their reduced margins. I'm kind of curious as to what your thoughts, if you guys were tracking this at all, if you had looked at it, if you heard what I said and you think I'm crazy. But I'm just looking at this and I'm like, this is not just a MI308.
No, it's a larger issue, Matt. And in the news this week around the federal government issuing export licenses to both AMD and NVIDIA, but it's almost like a Shark Tank episode with Trump.
Yeah.
And it's like, the federal government's going to collect a 15%. I'm sure you caught this. Licensing fee.
Yeah.
That, if AMD sort of continues on this trajectory, that's going to further weaken, taking 15% off the top is going to, you're not going to make it up in volume, right? That's what a lot of people say. It's like, hey, I'm taping money on every piece of semiconductor that goes out the door, but I'm going to make it up eventually on volume. But I agree with you. Like it doesn't add up for me. And it makes me wonder, is AMD taking this opportunity to sort of stuff more write-offs in the hopper here, because they were going to have to take their medicine anyway, right? With the China, with the restriction on the China export stuff. So yeah, obviously you follow compute much more deeply than I do, but I agree with your assertion. There's more here than meets the eye.
Yeah. What do you think, Paul?
I just kind of took a cursory look at it. It's priced at a pretty healthy PE ratio. It's over 127, and I think that's largely due to expectations on future growth and from AI. And if AMD is exposed to a lot of regulatory risk, competition, if they don't deliver on what people think the AI is going to do, then they're going to have a pretty sharp downside.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, Lisa Sue. She gave a very positive outlook for Q3 and the second half in general. So I think she's thinking that as MI 355 scales and 400 on the horizon, that AI story you're talking about is going to be, and that AI vision is going to be fulfilled. But I know that AMD sold a boatload of the MI 300 and the MI 325 over the last year, almost exclusively into the hyperscale community. The fact that it feels like that those parts did not continue to carry the day is a little bit curious for me. It makes me wonder if they underwhelmed or they're just not being utilized enough to warrant refreshes or reorders from those largest customers. But
if you look down the road, they've got strong revenue growth and everything, but if you look down the road, I mean, they've got things that might happen are export controls.
Yeah.
Some margin compression because of inventory charges. Their data center revenue didn't come in all that great. I don't remember what it was, but I was expecting it to be higher. There were some issues that that are hidden in there.
Yeah, I'm just a little curious because the only reason I compare it against Intel is it feels like this quarter for AMD was much more reliant on EPYC than it was their MI stuff. They had healthy growth, and EPYC is a very good part, and it has a lot of advantages over Xeon still. But if pricing is that competitive, I'm kind of curious as to how this all plays out over the next months. But I don't want to get into a Pat Moorhead financial discussion because he knows that far better than we do. But
what do you think about their data center performance?
AMD's?
Yeah.
But that's what I was just talking about. It's 3.2 billion is decent. 14% growth is normally healthy year over year, unless you look at kind of what it's been like sequentially. I mean, last quarter I think they were up 65% year over year, and that's not going from 65% year over year growth to 14% year over year growth is not the result solely of the MI 308 being restricted to China.
No.
You did not drop 50% in growth because you were unable to sell into China.
One market. Yeah. That doesn't add up. No.
For one part. That's just not adding up. There's more to it than that. There's a slowdown. And what I suspect is it's their GPU business in general. And I wish
a sign of broader weakness in the market, I think.
Well, we'll see what NVIDIA does. I suspect NVIDIA's numbers are going to be pretty darn strong. And the reason why I started with TSMC earning 3 weeks ago was to show that the chip business in general was super robust.
It's healthy. Yeah.
And the two of the larger customers are NVIDIA and AMD. So that's why I was expecting to see better performance out of it, AMD. But anyway, we could go on forever, and we're going to be focused on time. Let's go into what Mr. Will has been hitting on in the last segment. You're going to hit on Infoblox a little bit more at Black Hat and beyond. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I came up with a snappy headline because Paul always outdoes you and I when it comes to our headlines. But Precrime, what does that make you think of? Minority Report, right?
Right.
Minority Report with Tom Cruise. One of my favorite science fiction movies. And in the movie, they have this ability using sensors to predict, and they have these semi-alien people that help predict, before someone commits a crime. And so when you think about Infoblox and their focus over the last nearly 3 decades on domain name system, networking, and security, there is sort of a pre-crime capability with what they do with DNS security. So at Black Hat, they use the event to, I wouldn't say relaunch their Infoblox threat intelligence platform, but they sort of did. There's some additional enhancements to that. I did publish a Moor Insights and Strategy research brief, and our viewers and listeners, if you want to go hit the Moor Insights and Strategy website, you can download that to learn more. But at a very, very high level, what I've really liked about, and I've spent a lot of time with the company since Scott Harrell, who left Cisco to take over the CEO reins a few years ago. I've had an opportunity to spend time with Scott and his leadership team. What I really like about DNS, if you think about DNS, it sort of serves as the phone book for the internet, right? And bad actors can leverage it to their advantage, right? But sort of like with AI, what Infoblox is doing is, it's been focused on DNS. Its threat intelligence platform is DNS. They are able to use their architecture to actually identify domains that are potentially, capable of being weaponized, and even domains that sit dormant for months and even years. And so, and they've demonstrated their capability discovering, some of these threat actors before anyone else does. And so it's, from my perspective, DNS has sort of been an afterthought for many years. It's like, oh, okay, great. It's, it's another layer of protection. But what's interesting, NIST published its most recent update to its framework. And if you're not familiar with NIST, I know the three of us are, but it's the gold standard, right? So there's a zero trust architecture framework that's defined by NIST. But what's interesting is that just recently NIST added DNS security as a recommended best practice for organizations. And I think what that signals is that organizations should sort of reconsider how they view DNS fitting in a sort of the larger scheme of things from a protection standpoint. Yeah. And in this paper, I illustrate what I believe to be the power of DNS and what Infoblox is doing to refine the approach. And so my conclusion after having spent time with the team and spent time on this paper is that I think organizations, given NIST's update, stressing the importance of DNS, I think this gives organizations a moment to sort of reconsider it and maybe even consider making DNS more of a central part of an overall security architecture. So, but again, I've published a paper on our website, so our viewers and listeners, if you want to learn more, would encourage you to go download that. But what do you think about that whole notion of pre-crime, Matt?
It's kind of scary.
Yeah.
It's not scary. I think about Minority Report is kind of scary. So does this feel like a little bit of Back to the Future when we talk about DNS as kind of a key component of security architectures? I don't mean, and not Back to the Future is probably the wrong word. Maybe back to basics.
Yeah.
Is that a fair kind of?
I think it is, Matt, because what's happened, and this will just be the final point that I make on all this, is that when you look at just the highly disaggregated nature of networking today, right? Mm-hmm. So you have cloud service providers providing solutions. And the majority of enterprises and organizations are multi-cloud for best of breed and for, continuity of supply and price leverage and that sort of thing. And what's happened in this sort of highly disaggregated networked world where you've got cloud, you've got on-prem, you've got IoT, and what ends up happening is that many of these cloud solution providers, the security that they provide is pinned to their service offerings. So that drives complexity for IT staffs, right?
Yeah.
And you've got to understand, okay, if I've got an AWS instance and I've got a Google instance, there are different security tools that underpin those. I have to have experts in both. And that kind of creates fragmentation. It creates, difficulty in managing things. DNS, because again, getting back to the fact that it does serve, the underlying sort of IP address framework for the internet. I mean, it's sort of a single source of truth, right? And you get back to that. And then what you do, I mean, you continue to use those cloud service providers and those security tools. But if you put a DNS sort of architecture and make that more central to what you do, you immediately improve visibility. You eliminate the sort of the hairpinning with cloud service solution providers. And it's just good from my perspective. And I've been spending time with the company now for a couple of years. It's just good security hygiene from my perspective.
Yeah. Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I hate to rush, but we gotta
go. I know. I'm being very verbose this Monday morning.
No, you're good, man. It's me. I can't stop. I can't shut up. Take away from you guys. Back off that, Paul. I know what you're gonna say. But you are up, Mr. Smith Goodson, with your discussion on from bits to qubits. What the heck are we talking about here, Paul?
Yeah, well, I don't know, last month or 2 months ago, I don't remember, we talked about data centers, and we talked about quantum, and once quantum and AI come together, what are they going to be able to do? And I thought maybe we'd put something together here to talk about what quantum and AI could do for like a data center, for instance, since that's what we talk about, or what you guys talk about. The top three applications that are probably going to be worked on for quantum and AI, I think. One is a quantum machine learning. Machine learning, you guys know what that is. It's normal machine learning, normal computers look for patterns and do a lot of calculations and stuff. And quantum machine learning, these are quantum machines that can process data a lot faster, and they can do some quantum tricks. They've got quantum has got superposition, and they've got entanglement and things like that. That makes it a quantum. So QML can potentially solve very complex problems, like optimizing huge databases or recognizing patterns in massive amounts of data. And they can do it a lot faster than machine learning. So it's just kind of a natural for data centers. In fact, we've got a private application we're looking at doing quantum machine learning on, the government project, and it's amazing doing a comparison between classical and quantum machine learning and the vast difference that it makes. Quantum algorithm, QML uses quantum algorithms, which are really just versions of classical algorithms. They could be entirely brand new quantum algorithms for processing data. Quantum machine learning works directly with quantum data that classical learning can't do. So the measurements can come directly from quantum sensors, or leveraging properties that classical analog doesn't have. So, or QML can use a hybrid model where they've got quantum is doing one part of the operation and classical is doing the other part. So, but it boils down to speed, and that's what's going to be when you get all huge amounts of stuff. I mean, for that to those two things to come together in a data center is going to really make a make a big difference. Some of the applications might see is like healthcare, do really ultra fast simulations for drug discovery, personalized medicine. I mean, we're going to the doctor, and they like the old mortar and pestle thing, where they, instead of using that, they would use a quantum computer to design your own personal prescription.
Yeah.
Finance. I mean, QML is going to do amazing things for finance. They're already working on different applications, but it'll make a big difference in even your own personal finance and the way you manage it. Material, that's a big one, is simulating and being able to discover new chemicals and materials. All this stuff is going to be done in a data center.
Yeah.
Because of a huge processing power that is going to be needed.
Yeah.
I mean, QML down the road, 4 or 5 years, is going to be it's going to transform basically how we live. So the second one is optimization and simulation. Most of the really complex problems that we've got trying to solve in the world are optimization problems because they're so complex. They've got so many different things and stuff. Using regular computers for optimization is so, compared to what quantum can do, operating with classical is so slow that it's like molasses. So basically, it's a data center application. So that's one thing we're going to see. The other thing we've talked about before is post-quantum cryptography. I wrote a big article on that, several of them, 6 months ago or so, on what's being done on that. But post-quantum cryptography and cybersecurity, creating cybersecurity, quantum can be helpful in that. So data centers are going to be at the forefront of implementing the new security protocols and developing it. So that includes everything from secure communications to encrypted data storage. And those are like the three main things. So kind of hurried through that. I know we're running out of time, but anyway.
I'm really curious on the QML. That to me is where my head goes when I think about kind of quantum in the enterprise. You talk about drug discovery, finance, materials, education. There are so many different areas where I think.
Quantum can, look at millions of things simultaneously, and classical can only look at things one at a time. So
hey, that cure for cancer that we always not joke about, but talk about. This is where.
Yeah.
All right, let me hit the last one real quickly so that we can get people out of here on time. Apologize if I'm going to go fast, but I wanted to talk about, this is like hot off the press. We're going to be the first podcast to cover this. So NVIDIA announced their, what's it called? The RTX Pro server. So back at GTC, back in March, NVIDIA announced the RTX Pro 6000 GPU. This is a workstation GPU built on Blackwell architecture that they're bringing to a server form factor to do things like visualization, analytics, VDI, those some HPC, those kind of enterprise workloads that need acceleration, but don't necessarily need like the B300, right? Like the big honking B300 GPU. That's what the RTX 6000 or Pro 6000 is. So now they're doing RTX Pro servers. They just announced it today, shipping through Cisco, Dell, HPE, Lenovo, Supermicro, so on and so forth, which is essentially the entire stack, right? So it's the RTX 6000 Pro GPU, Spectrum X, NVLink, all of the and all the software, the entire NVIDIA stack to support enterprise IT. So why is this interesting to me? So HPE actually started shipping an RTX server back in June. But what I find interesting is when we talk about AI, and we talk about it on this podcast quite a bit, and we talk about, when we were just about AMD earlier with the MI300, 355, so on and so forth, or the NVIDIA H200, B200, so on and so forth. When we talk about those, knowingly or unknowingly, we're talking about like what hyperscalers are doing to train the largest of the foundation models.
Right.
Or if we're talking about enterprise, we're talking about enterprise customers like JP Morgan Chase, or some of the largest enterprises out there that have hundreds of thousands of servers and act more like a Facebook than they do a regular enterprise, right? Just because they're so big and their IT budgets are so large. We don't ever really talk about two things. One, what does inference look like when it hits the enterprise data center?
Mm-hmm.
What's the impact? And number two, how does the enterprise on Main Street kind of operate, right? So forget about JP Morgan Chase. How does an enterprise with 5,000 employees and 1,000 servers, how do they implement AI across the data center? They still need data local, right? And especially in the era of agentic, you're going to be tuning these models over and over again. You can have a bunch of different models that are running at the departmental level. And then you have to manage all the kind of agentic stuff going on the back end, right? To me, that Main Street enterprise, this is where the RTX Pro servers are really interesting, because they're like, they're the Blackwell architecture, and they'll continue along as they do Vera Rubin and so forth. They're like the GPUs for Main Street instead of the GPUs for Wall Street, if you will, right? Far more affordable, much smaller power footprint, 600 watts versus 1,400 watts or so. Have multi-use. This is not just a training part, and not that the Blackwells are, but this is a GPU that can do your training and can do your VDI sessions and can do your visualization and analytics and some of your EDA work, electronic design stuff. This is the GPU for the masses. And interestingly, there really is not a competitor out there. When you look at AMD's response to NVIDIA, it's all around MI300, 355, 400, the large scale. They haven't really addressed kind of that enterprise. So to me, this is NVIDIA playing chess, where the rest of the market's kind of playing checkers. And they're really kind of getting out in front and establishing that commercial enterprise footprint that can be sold through the channel, serviced through the channel, managed through the channel. And by channel, I don't mean Accenture, I mean SHI, and managed through the channel for folks that are looking to deploy and activate AI on a much smaller scale. So great story. Love what they're doing. I'll be curious to see what the response from the market looks like. If you guys want to weigh in over the next couple of minutes, feel free to.
Just a question, Matt. So when I sort of look at the earnings of like HPE and Dell and others, I'm seeing sort of today a trend, and tell me if I'm off, about a third of the AI compute infrastructure is being sold into enterprise. Does that add up for you, or is that being
maybe a little bit less, but yeah,
a little bit less? Yeah, okay, maybe a quarter. I mean, this really sounds like what NVIDIA is doing could really move the needle, right, in the enterprise, and really dramatically, shift the mix. Because to your point, all of these parts are built for these huge hyperscaler deployments, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's a good point. And to what you're saying, even those that let's say it's a third. Let's say 33% of Dell's AI shipments are going, AI factory shipments, or HPE's AI factory shipments are going to the enterprise. They're not going to regular enterprise, or they're going to enterprise customers that act like more like so it's not even really hitting the enterprise. Oh, and by the way, they're being sold at relatively low margin.
The margins are dog shit. Pardon my French, right?
They're very low, right? This, I suspect, is going to open up the margins more for for those customers. Like Dell is going to be shipping an RTX Pro server that's built on their, I think it's a 7725 server, which is an AMD based. It's a 2U, 2-socket AMD EPYC based system that's going to have the RTX 6000 Pro inside of there with, I'm sure, with Spectrum X and with with all the NVIDIA goodness, obviously the NVIDIA software, enterprise software. So these are commercial servers that I think Dell, HPE, Cisco, so on and so forth are going to be able to mark up appropriately to sell into commercial. That is still affordable to commercial, but delivers much better margin relief to the systems folks than what they're seeing with the B200, B300, and what will be Vera Rubin and all those as well. So it's just a great story. It's plug them into regular racks, air cooled, maybe liquid cooled at some point, but you can support them with air cooled, and they plug and play, and away you go. I love what they're doing here.
Yeah, it should scale things quite a bit, and like the power envelope difference, I had no idea that it was that dramatic. Right, that's pretty significant. So cool.
Yeah. Hey, Paul, any thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, you guys covered it.
Look at you, man. You got to get back in your time capsule and return to 2025. Hey, listen, we went a little bit long today, but it was such a good discussion, and the football stuff may have been the most fun, but great discussion. We talked about a lot. Before we close out here, let's wish everybody a good week. And I don't think any of us are traveling this week for work. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a week at home for sure.
Yeah, I got some personal stuff coming up, but okay. All right. So I know we're going to be on the road at the end of the month and heading into September, but thank you all for staying with us. We kept our viewer count up to 24,000 viewers from beginning to end. I love that.
It's down from our normal million.
Yeah, we're down. It's August. That's how it is in August.
People are focused on back to school and wrapping up their vacation. So can't blame them.
But thank y'all for tuning in, and I'm going to close with, again, like and subscribe. If you enjoyed what you heard, don't take anything we said as investment advice. If you do, shame on you. And please be tuned in a couple of weeks where I think we'll be starting to get ready for the travel season. So we'll have even more to talk about.
Yeah.
All right. Any last thoughts before we close out, guys?
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Love it. All right. Thanks all. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.